So a traditional skate setup, you've got the boot, you've got the frame, you've got the wheels, you got the bearings. Let's grab, this is a good one, just a very generic aggressive skate. So this is a razor shift boot. This is a rollerblade blank frame with rollerblade wheels. I'm not sure what bearings are in there, but there are some bearings. So this is just a very standard, generic setup. There's nothing super, this is a stock setup. The shift is an interesting skate. You can replace the frame quickly. The blank frame is a really great anti-rocker frame. So you could see yourself skating this, but how do you get the most out of it? Well, from a skating perspective, you're not going to get much out of the boot. So I don't really care about the boot right now. But the frame, the wheels, the frame spacers, the wheel spacers, and the bearings are going to make a huge difference in how much speed you can get if you're skating aggressive, if you're skating trails, if you're skating speed, if you're skating urban. Those 4 pieces of equipment will make a huge difference. So let me start with the frame. Let's see, what's a good frame to demonstrate? So this is a really interesting one. So this is an old Salomon UFS FSK frame. This is a high-low frame. So high-low means that the front 2 wheels are a smaller wheel diameter than the rear wheels. In this case, the rears are 80 and the fronts are 76, I think. But because of the way that they're rockered, they all ride flat. I don't actually have any 76 and 80 mil wheels that I can show, but if I did, I would break them out. This is, it's a good example of what the standard free skate or recreational frame is like now. So it's got the axles that mount the wheels to the frame. The frame, in this case, uses UFS to mount it, which is an interesting choice, mostly for aggressive skates, but in this case, Salomon was using it for free skate. I think K2 uses the UFS system for free skate still, which is a really good option if you're interested in getting a boot that can do aggressive and it can do free skate. But anyway, we're not talking about that tonight. So it mounts, with the normal 2-hole system. This is UFS. Sometimes it'll be a 165. The inside, so this is the inside of the frame. This being a extruded machined aluminum frame has frame spacers that are built in. So this is a one-piece frame. It is fully aluminum, and the frame spacers, these little raised areas between the wheels, are where the wheels would mount. They are usually between 1 to 2 millimeters, and they separate the wheels from the frame. So if the wheel was in there, it could still freely rotate without rubbing on the frame. This is an aluminum frame. If you were getting a plastic frame, typically you wouldn't have the frame spacers built in. Some frames do, but most frames have frame spacers that are inserted in aftermarket. Let me find a set. There we go. So these are some standard aggressive frames. These are the Volo frames, now Rossi's frames. You can see they're plastic. They don't have the frame spacers in them. You have to get them separate. So you would put the frame spacer in, and you can see it slides right in. That's where the wheel would go. And it makes it capable for your wheels to spin without rubbing on the frames. And this is what most skates will have. They will have a plastic frame, an aggressive skate. They'll have a plastic frame with some sort of a typically aluminum frame spacer that slides into the frame wheel wells and the axle wells, and they allow you to mount the wheels to them. So there's not a lot of improvement that you can do there. You can get, if you want to get a little faster, you can get some aluminum frames. Being stronger and being metal with a tighter tolerance will help you get a little more speed out of it. Obviously, lighter is always better. But if you're skating aggressive, what kind of options do you have? Well, first, you could talk about wheels. So the wheel size is going to make a huge difference in how fast you skate. Most aggressive frames fit anywhere from, as low as like a 55. I think they make 54s even. You can skate flat 50s if you wanted. But 54 millimeter is probably the lowest you're ever going to go. And then they can fit all the way up. I usually stop counting aggressive at around 65. You could get a wish frame that has a 72 on the outside and a 60 on the inside. I don't know if the speed is equal to a 72 or if the speed is equal to a 60. So I'll say, on average, you get about a 65. I think I have a 65 millimeter wheel. Hold on. Actually, this is a 64 millimeter. This is one of the ground control 64 millimeter wheels. And these are fine. A 64 millimeter wheel is going to be bigger. You're going to be able to skate faster with a 64 millimeter wheel than if you had, here's my, so this is a 59 millimeter wheel. The smaller the wheel, the faster acceleration you're going to have. But the bigger the wheel, the longer you're going to be able to coast. So if you were skating mini ramp, and all you're doing is accelerating and then getting up to another wall, and accelerating and then getting up to another wall, you probably don't need a huge wheel. You'll go pretty fast if you got a big wheel, but anything, 54 to 65 is going to be great for skating mini ramp. If you want to skate faster, bigger wheels are always a good way to do that. Anything from 60 to 65 is probably going to be great. Again, I think the wish frame is a great design. 72s on the outside, 60s on the inside. You'll go pretty fast with that. I don't know how much faster. I need to do some testing to see if the 60s are as fast as you'll go, or the 72s, or if it's something in the middle. Look for a future video where I investigate a little bit more on that. So that's wheels. So from a wheel perspective, I don't know that the profile makes that much of a difference for speed. Of course, the less material that's touching, the faster you're probably going to go. There's a reason why speed wheels like this 100 millimeter rollerblade hydrogen wheel, this is a bullet profile versus a rounded profile of any of these aggressive wheels. You can imagine that this is going to be faster. There's less material touching the ground, but I don't have any tests to prove that. I need to see if I can find some 60 millimeter speed wheels and some 60 millimeter rounded wheels and do some tests to see if it actually makes a difference. I think it does. I think that this profile is going to be much faster, but I really want to test that before I have a good opinion on that. So for wheels, bigger is faster. That's just kind of a known thing. Smaller will be faster acceleration. So if you're trying to skate quickly, short distance, you probably want a smaller wheel. If you want to skate further distance, probably want a bigger wheel. Next thing to think about is bearings. So bearings are always something that people have opinions about. Whether the generic Abec 5 bearings that come on your skates are good enough, or if you should upgrade and get some full ceramic $100 bearings. My opinion is you probably don't need to spend a ton of money on bearings if all you're doing is skating aggressive, skate park, urban, stuff like that. A generic Abec 5 bearing, so this is just a generic Abec 5 bearing. It's a sealed bearing. It is probably greased on the inside. So there's two ways that you can lubricate a bearing, either with grease or oil. More expensive bearings usually use oil. The negative to oil is that you need to service them more often. The positive to oil is that they'll be a little bit faster and a little bit less resistance. Grease is a great design for aggressive, especially if you want a sealed bearing. If you're going to skate through dirt, or if you're going to fall off of a handrail onto some grass or something like that. A sealed bearing, in my experience, has been all that I've needed, And to be honest, I don't want to clean my bearings. I want these bearings to last as long as they can, and as soon as they start sounding bad, I throw them out and I get new ones. So I don't like to spend a ton of money on bearings. When I buy bearings for aggressive, I buy sealed bearings. When I buy bearings for trails, I will buy oil serviceable bearings, which are these. So this is a Wicked Abec 9 bearing. These are the ones that came on my Imperial Super Cruiser Pros. And you can see this back area is an open serviceable gasket, I guess you would call it. So basically you pop off the gasket and you can get to the bearings if you need to do a deep clean. But you can leave it like this and put it in a bearing cleaner. So this is a bearing cleaner. It's a little jar that you stick these little things, you stick the bearings on these things and you stack them up. You pour acetone or some sort of a orange non-water based cleaning solution in there, and you put all the bearings in, you shake them up and you make them nice and clean, and you rinse it out and you wipe it down and you dry it off. It's a lot of work. If you are going to spend a ton of money on ceramic bearings or some of those crazy, what are they, like the 6-ball, I don't know that high-end bearing. Again, for me, I just can't tell the difference. Any sealed bearing, an Abec 7 or an Abec 9 to me is good enough for the way that I skate. I have a feeling that if you're on that level of telling the difference between bearings, high-end bearings, you're probably know way more than I do. So, so serviceable bearings, I think they're great for trails and such, but you really do have to take care of them. And I can't see myself cleaning bearings very often. I don't have a ton of time to begin with. So, I got these because they came with the skates. I don't know that I would buy serviceable bearings again. It just seems like a lot of work. And for me personally, I don't know that I'm going to get that much out of the speed increase that I would get from a serviceable bearing. The last thing that I wanted to talk about bearings is the Abec rating. So these are Abec 5 bearings. They are the ones that came on most skates. These are Abec 9 bearings. These are the ones that came on my power slide skates. These are faster than these. These are smoother than these. I don't know if that's because it says Abec 9 on it. I don't know if that's because the ball bearings are at a higher tolerance or nothing. I don't know why. All the research that I've done on the Abec rating leads me to believe that anything over like an Abec 3, maybe even an Abec 5, we're not going to tell the difference as inline skaters because we don't go fast enough. The Abec rating, so Abec is a standard that they determine how precision each of these little ball bearings within this bearing needs to be. And if it's within this special tolerance, then it can be graded an Abec 9, which is the highest Abec rating that it goes, all the way down to 1. So it's 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I don't know that I'm able to tell the difference between an Abec 5 or an Abec 9. I don't know that the Abec rating really means all that much. From everything that I've read, it seems like anything above an Abec 5 is kind of lost on the sort of skating that I do. However, I will say that in my experience, the higher the Abec rating, the more quality the bearing is. And that's not to say that it's because the bearings are of a higher tolerance, but I've got that experience that the higher the Abec rating, I've had really great Abec 9 bearings. I've had a few Abec 5 bearings that were good. I think the consistency that you get in an Abec 9 bearing, again, in my experience, has been much higher than the consistency that I get with an Abec 5. But that is to say that the Abec rating is not the only thing that you should use when picking out bearings. You should consider what sort of skating you're going to do, whether you need greased or oiled. Typically if you're a sealed bearing, you want greased. If you want an open serviceable bearing, you want oil. and the fast speed, the speed that you're going to go, oil will be a little bit faster than grease. Oil will require more service than grease. The thing about bearings is that the bearing doesn't dictate how fast you go. You know, that's mostly from the wheel and the wheel size and the wheel profile and the wheel hardness and all of the wheel things. What the bearing does is it helps you coast. So it lets you coast further between strides. So if your bearings are not great, you can skate really fast and you're just going to keep skating because you're going to have to skate as fast as you can for a longer amount of time. If you have really great bearings, you can skate really fast and keep your speed between more strides and more pushes and more carves and such. So the two of those work together to create this nice relationship, the wheel and the bearing, so that you can get some really good speed. The best bearing that you can get and the biggest wheel that you can get is going to get you going as fast as you're able to. The last thing to talk about from a hardware perspective is the wheel spacer. So wheel spacers are these little things that stick between the wheels. So setting up this wheel, what you would do is you would put one of the bearings, on one side. I'm not going to push it all the way in, but you see what I mean. And you drop the wheel spacer in the middle, and then you put the other bearing on the other side. Pop, like that. So these wheel spacers are anywhere from 10 millimeters to 10.4 millimeters. There's a little bit of tolerance between them. The reason that they're 10 millimeters is that a standard wheel is, get this bearing out. A standard wheel, so wheel from wall to wall, is 24 millimeters. And that's fairly standard. You're going to find a little bit of tolerance. Better wheels will probably have a more consistent 24 millimeters, but 24 millimeters is usually what you get for a wheel from wall to wall. A bearing, you know, a standard 608 bearing which is the one, 608 is the number, the naming number for the size. So it's, I want to say that it's 6 millimeters between, I don't know where the numbers come from. I'm sorry. I know that the 8 is the interior, so it's an 8 millimeter for an 8 millimeter axles that goes in the middle. I think the 6 is between the two, but I could be wrong. But the width of this bearing is 7 millimeters. And again, it could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less, but on average it's about 7 millimeters. So since you'll have two bearings, you'll have the wheel, you'll have one bearing, so 7 plus 7, 14. You need something that's around 10 millimeters that goes in the middle. You don't want to put that pressure on the wheel. I've seen people skate without putting a wheel spacer in the middle, and all they have is bearings. That's a quick way to burn out your bearings and to just destroy your wheels. It is important to put a wheel spacer in the middle. And usually wheel spacers come with frames, they'll come with your skates, you can get them aftermarket. I highly recommend getting aluminum frame spacer, wheel spacers. I don't know that you can find that many plastic ones, but it's worth spending the extra money to get the aluminum so that you know that that tolerance is pretty accurate. 10 millimeters is what you want. You're going to have to measure though. This is where things get a little funny. You can try different bearing spacers in different wheels and get slightly different results. Because the tolerances are all a little bit off. Typically what I want is a wheel spacer that's a little bit bigger than 10 millimeters, so that when I put it in my wheel and I put the wheel in the frame, I can tighten down this frame because this connection between these two is 24 millimeters, right? I can tighten down my axles and make it really tight between these 2 points, and I can just get aluminum the whole way through. So I've got the aluminum frame spacers even on the aggressive skates. So I'll have the aluminum frame spacer that goes in here. I've got the wheel that goes in here. I've got the axle that goes through. I've got the bearing. I've got the wheel spacer, and then the other bearing, and then the other frame spacer. And I make this really tight metal on metal on metal on metal. And that is the best way to get as much speed out of your equipment as I know of. I'm always learning though, so if you have ways that I could go faster, not including technique, just talking about equipment, I'd love to hear about it. Please let me know in the comments. All right. So the reason for everybody listening to the live stream or watching this in the recording is I get a lot of people asking about wheel spacers and bearings and things like that, and it might be something that old experienced skaters just kind of take for granted. But there's a lot of like black arts out there, and there's not a lot of accurate information. Again, for me, I've been learning. I know this stuff pretty well. I design frames. I'm learning about bearings. I'm learning about wheels. I'm learning about all of this stuff. If you have more information, I would love to know. I don't think that there's a wealth of information out there. And I'd love to share it so that everybody can get the same level of knowledge that I have, and I'd love to learn more so that I have even more knowledge. For me, though, I found that these serviceable bearings, they just feel a little, I don't know, more expensive than I need. And full disclosure, I own a skate company that's selling bearings. We sell sealed bearings. Those are the bearings that I found that fit my budget that I skate. I think that there are people who will love servicing bearings. And I think there are people who will appreciate a really good oil, open side ceramic bearing and don't mind spending, $80 for a set of 8 or $10 a bearing. I mean, some of these bearings are crazy expensive, and maybe they can tell the difference. I am not at the level of ability where I can. It's like buying, a $500 golf club. I'm just going to go out there and hack the hell out of it. I don't know how to play golf. So for me, sealed bearings are the way to go. Greased bearings are the way to go. Don't spend more than $20 on a set of 8. I think that's kind of the message. The best ways to eke out a little bit more is, make sure that you use as much metal as you can. Frame spacers, wheel spacer. If you can get a metal frame that's, got the frame spacer built in, that's even better. You can go even faster.